Greetings, Eddie Muller here, welcoming you to Noir Alley. A lot of noir stories revolve around memory loss. So just to be clear, these films fall into two groups, amnesia noir and blackout noir. In the former, the protagonist wonders, who am I? In the latter, they wonder, what did I do? In these, identity isn't at issue. It's the inconvenient gap in the memory, the kind crooks and politicians routinely suffer under deposition. Today's movie, no surprise, fits snugly in the latter category. Blackout was released in America in 1954 by Lippert Pictures, specifically to fill the bottom half of double bills. As I explained several weeks ago when I showed Bad Blonde, Robert Lippert was an American producer of B-movies who entered into a partnership with England's Hammer Films in the 1950s for a series of co-productions. The films were made in England, with Lippert providing Hollywood stars who made the finished products more saleable in the U.S. When this film was released in England in 1955, it was called Murder by Proxy, the title of the source novel by mystery author Helen Nielsen. She wrote 18 novels and lots of short stories, but this is the only book of hers that was turned into a movie. She also wrote scripts for Alfred Hitchcock Presents and the Perry Mason TV shows. A prolific career for a woman who started out as an aeronautical draftsman, creating designs for World War II aircraft. The screenplay is by Richard Landau, an American writer used on virtually every Hammer-Lippert co-production. He added a lot to this one, because Nielsen's story is not set in England. The change allowed Landau to have lots of fun pitting the gruff Yank played by Dane Clark against his silky smooth, stiff upper lip British counterparts. Clark is really good at expressing the character's confusion and embarrassment, which he does with more vulnerability than some other American actors would have shown. Clark's male adversaries are a pretty standard issue bunch, but the film greatly benefits from three intriguing female performers. Belinda Lee was only 19 years old when she made this movie. It's her first major role, and she's introduced in one of my favorite opening scenes in any noir film ever. Her mother is played by Betty Ann Davies, a veteran performer who just made the terrific Outcast of the Islands for Carol Reed. She comes in late here, but is worth the wait. But it's Eleanor Summerfield, in only a handful of scenes, who pretty much steals the show, portraying a British version of Eve Arden. Summerfield turns a character who's little more than a plot device into a completely believable person. Her line deliveries are spot-on perfection. The same cannot be said for the script, however. It is, I have to admit, maddeningly inconsistent. The premise is unique and splendidly set up, but the film at times veers into statically staged volleys of expository dialogue, trying to explain a complicated backstory that, frankly, didn't matter one whit to me and probably won't to you either. But every time you're about to say, enough already, director Terence Fisher executes an unexpected scene in a fresh and exciting way, and suddenly the head-spinning plot takes a back seat to some surprising character switches. You will see what I mean. Just when you think you know where the story is going, it takes a detour that makes it feel like a totally different movie has suddenly dropped into the middle of this one. So to fully enjoy Blackout, my advice is to not fixate on plot details. Just roll with it and enjoy the constantly shifting conflicts between the characters. Plus, it's exciting to see Terence Fisher, who'd been churning out fodder films since 1948, come into his own as a director. He blows through all the talky stuff in long, static, single takes, but he brings great verve and inventiveness to plenty of standout set pieces. Hammer producer Michael Carreras was a big jazz fan, which he proves in the very first scene, showcasing the great Cleo Lane. She's 26 here, on her way to earning over the next 70 years Grammy nominations for pop, jazz, and classical recordings. She is a great way to get this show started. From 1954, here is Murder by Proxy, aka Blackout. I'll bet you didn't see a happy ending coming. But honestly, how long is that marriage going to last? Seems to me Casey Morrow is still suffering a blackout at the end. I wouldn't be that forgiving to Phyllis, no matter how ridiculously beautiful she is. Well, maybe not. In the intro, I mentioned how director Terence Fisher had a habit of staging scenes of expository dialogue in long, static, single takes, which was not uncommon for films made on short schedules and shoestring budgets. Take, for example, the scene where Casey and Phyllis search the detective's office. In the middle of it, Dane Clark actually blows his lines, saying, "I knew," when he's supposed to say, "he knew."
I knew. He knew that the killer must have been the man he was investigating.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is a true pro at work. Fisher never said cut, and Clark never breaks character. He just rights the ship and sails on. Print it. Next scene. Renee Glenn, the script supervisor on virtually every film Hammer made, recalled having a terrible time with Dane Clark because he'd taken quite a shine to Belinda Lee. He disliked that Glenn was constantly correcting her performance due to continuity mistakes. He stopped speaking to Glenn on the set, and she refused to work on the next picture Clark made for Hammer, another crime picture called Paid to Kill. By the end of the 1950s, Belinda Lee had overcome her early awkwardness to become a big attraction, mostly playing sexy roles in films like The Goddess of Love, This Desired Body, and The Knights of Lucretia Borgia. A scandalous affair with an Italian nobleman brought her censure from the Vatican, and by 1960, she was in a relationship with the controversial filmmaker Gualtiero Jacopetti, one of the creators of the shockumentary Mondo Cane. Lee made more than 30 films in the 7 years following Blackout, but it all came to an abrupt and shocking end in 1961, when she was killed in a car accident at only 25 years of age. Her birthday, what would have been her 91st, is Monday. Sadly, Betty Ann Davies, who played her mother in this film, died the year after making Blackout from complications following a routine appendectomy. She was only 44. Faring better were the film's director, Terence Fisher, and his assistant director, Jimmy Sangster. Together, they would eventually build Hammer into the house that dripped blood, as the studio became known after its output switched from crime dramas to horror. Sangster, who'd been Hammer's production coordinator for years, transitioned to writing, scripting many of the films that Terence Fisher directed, including The Curse of Frankenstein and Dracula, both starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. These are the films that would comprise the lasting legacy of both Fisher and Sangster. Noir Alley will be back next week at Bar 355 with a film starring a British import to the United States, one who just happens to be the most talented woman in movie history. Ida Lupino is at the pinnacle of her glam movie star phase in The Man I Love, a darkly romantic melodrama directed by Raoul Walsh that features all sorts of fabulous music, in addition to the great title song by George and Ira Gershwin. I've been showing it on big screens all year long as part of my Noir City film festivals, but if you can't get to one of those, this is the next best thing. Until then, see you in the shadows.
Next on TCM, My Dinner with Andre, then Dinner at 8, and later, 21 Days. TCM is worth the wait tonight.